Welcome to another Friday with Rooster. We have a great show for you coming up today. A lot to cover, so stick around. We got a lot of events. Anyway, I just want you to know that if you're following along this far, I really appreciate you. It means a lot that anyone would stick around and listen to me talk. So go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. How can we make this channel better? Are these headlines boring? Is there things we could cover that you find interesting that are related to radio? These are just the things that I find interesting. You guys know how I do this. I dive right into it every Friday. So again, it's 420. This is California, so grab whatever libation of choice, beers, you name it. Sit back and let's dive into this weekend and cover some of the most interesting things I found this week. Mystery notes. Have you guys seen the news about mystery notes going around San Diego downtown? It's I saw it on social media, but I started looking into it. There's a series of notes going around that are looking for, I guess you could say, people that are would want to help with. Okay, let me just backtrack. The notes describe a horrific world of human body parts trading. There's like an undermarket, or excuse me, a black market for body parts south of the border that is international. Um, a lot of us have seen movies, but I don't know. This day and age, anything's possible. The notes are pretty horrific. You can read it here. I'll put it up. And you can pause the video, but basically, this describes this horrific world this person came from, and that I guess they're seeking vengeance. That kind of reads like a plot to Sicario 4 or something. What are we on 4? I think we're on. I don't know. Three's coming, four's next. So kind of a plot out of a movie. But they're pretty interesting. So anyway, they're floating around. Just thought it would be a thing to look out for, since we do talk about communications. And yeah, leaflets and notes like that, those types of pamphlets are a form of communication. All right, moving right along. A lot of dead bodies popping up in San Diego. I don't know if you guys saw the mountain biker found dead on Mission Trails, guy in his 50s. Just remember, you're this time of year, especially with summertime. You got to hydrate. Cycling, you gotta eat and drink while you're riding, those types of things to nourish the body with depleting electrolytes. And cycling tends to get pretty crazy if you're going those long distance rides. I went to just Del Mar the other day from where I'm at, and that's about a 50-mile ride there and back, just to shake things out. But still, I was, oh my gosh, I haven't done this in a while. I need to carry more water and some more snacks because my body's not trained to that level right now. So anyway, all that to say is be careful when you're out there hiking and being active. Yeah, they were found in the trail. I guess it was parks, and the park rangers came and picked up the body and moved on. And let's see here. Another thing here. Shooting suspect arrested in, I want to say it was Grant Hill, right, with an SBR. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. You just see that the pistol brace, SBRs, those classifications out there kind of they come up in these types of communities. This was obviously, I don't want to say obviously, but it's south of the 94. You're on, talking about 805, those areas. We all know in San Diego, kind of areas to avoid at night. This was one of them. So see SBRs like this kind of pop up there, and it just piques my interest of what's going on out there in the streets. Got to get those switches, dog. Anyway, moving right along. We got, I don't know if you guys saw this report. The average salary, it was going back to, I want to say they were saying $100,000 salary has about the same buying power, like $100,000 salary in 2020, excuse me, has the same buying power as like 124K. Yeah, $124,000 in 2025 dollars. So this article's highlighting that the 25% drop due to inflation of the dollar. And I think that's interesting because we continue to see housing skyrocket in San Diego. Still, rents, I think are still on the verge of ridiculous. And some would say there's hope in sight with all the new permits and ADUs popping up everywhere. I simply say that inflation is going to make everything harder on everyone for a lot longer than we think. So anyway, all that to say is that save, go out there, get a second grind. It's kind of what all this is for everyone, is a second hustle. Trying to, I don't know if this is a hustle, it's YouTube, but I mean, you know what I mean. Like, get out there, start a taco truck. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. Elections have consequences. I digress. the Midway crash. Oh my God! Did you guys see the Midway crash? Okay, so first reports on this one was interesting. First, they show the boat hitting the Midway, and all you guys. This happens more than you think. It happens quite often. It's nothing new under the sun. Boats hit the Midway quite often here in San Diego Bay. Anyway, the initial reports were showing the no damage done to the 60-foot sport fisher. It looked like a bayliner, but it's sports fisherman vessel, 60 foot, pretty big size, and then no damage to the Midway. And then I saw recent reports later on this week showing up to $100,000 in damages. I don't know, paints get expensive, for the Navy, in the defense contracting world, it's the special paints too, by the way, but nonetheless, you know, fixing an aircraft carrier is expensive. So if there is damage, $100,000 is not an unreasonable amount of money to factor in, especially when it's the Midway and it's a historic landmark. Stay clear. You know what? We're at the point where they're going to put barriers around the Midway to keep sailboats and sport fishing vessels away. It's nice. I take my boat right up to it, and it's fine as long as you know what you're doing. It shouldn't be a problem, but for some reason that boat just seems to attract credit card captains, is what we call them on the water. All right, moving on. Another interesting story right out of San Diego here. City just got permission. I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of the property along the freeways is state-owned property. Some of it runs through. Anyway, so a lot of it's state property, and it's not city property. So there's like, a jurisdiction thing that has to be followed, and requests got to be made. And long story short, bureaucracy later. That's how we started. In bureaucracy minutes later, we get to a point where the city can actually go out and clean up its areas. And we're talking about the encampments, that you see popping up along the five. I don't know if anybody's gotten on the five, right where the 163 on ramp's at, right there. Gosh, what would that be? Pershing. That's a huge encampment area. A lot of meth, a lot of prostitution, a lot of drug. All that stuff's going on down there. And if you're going to work, it's kind of unsightly. You live in America's finest city, and you're driving through this dystopian wayside that looks like a scene from The Walking Dead. And it's discouraging. I think that has a reverberation throughout the rest of the city. Is when people see that type of thing, it tends to evoke emotions, good or bad, but generally not in a positive direction for many. Anyway, I digress. I bring that up because, yeah, the state's going to get reimbursed $400,000 to do. The next story I thought was going to be more interesting. Do you guys remember the Palisades fire up in LA? Yeah. All right. So SB 549. Get this. I don't know if you guys had a chance to take a look at the bill, but there's a bill, SB 549, to purchase fire damaged properties. It forces California taxpayers, including the Palisades residents, through their property taxes to fund the buyout of that area, and it requires 40% of new housing to be for homeless. People are pissed because it overrides community input and, yeah, allows the rezoning of that area without approval. So it's kind of like a, a shortcut way to get land through the state legislature. It's sort of bisecting the state's jurisdiction, or not the state, but the city's jurisdiction to govern its own properties and lands, right? Okay, moving right along. Continuing on with the theme of the legislature, legislators are proposing a bill that will push alcohol sales cutoff time till about 4 a.m. So here in California, I think it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. I'm not sure. Anyway. You're going to be able to get alcohol later in California here pretty soon if the California legislature's bills get through. Interesting, the bills, it sets the vibe and tone of laws coming out of California. We got more leniency going toward the operating hours of dispensaries in California, and now you're going to be able to get your alcohol much later. That I'm not saying that in jest. How there are considerations, when the legislative analyst's office puts these studies together about how to propose bills, junk science or not, there's still data to support some argument, and I'm curious to find whether or not later hours has a decreasing effect on vagrancy, teenage access, all types of things. So there's a lot of things when it comes to density and all those studies that support why operating hours matter, and all that with licensing and structure licenses for businesses, all environmental impact studies. A lot of jargon, but all that to say is you're going to be able to get alcohol a little bit later. Staying with the county here, though, Tara Lawson-Remer takes the chair of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. I don't know if you guys are following this, but the San Diego County Board of Supervisors membership has changed recently in response. Well, as a result of the July 1st special election, Paloma. Let me get this right. Paloma Aguirre gets the first district. So as you can see, the San Diego County Board of Supervisors member parties is starting to lean more Democrat, uh, with the two Republicans still sitting on the board, Joel Anderson and Jim Desmond. So just be mindful when you're looking at governance and governing bodies to pay attention to. It's usually going to be the ones in your backyard. San Diego County Board of Supervisors controls things like fee structures, when they do the budget. So when your CCW permits fees increase, that's definitely out of a board function, usually through the sheriff's requesting that. And there's a lot of process to that. I encourage you to check into that because there's some mandates by the Department of Justice that continue to get waived and you know blown by with respect to how policy is passed at the county level. So just be mindful of that, and that's why your CCWs are more expensive now. Anyway, all right. Kind of sticking around in the region. I know it's not San Diego, but you remember last week when I brought up the drones being used to check on or to find offenders of lighting fireworks in Southern California cities? Well, Riverside just released footage of these clowns. I'll put it up here, lighting fireworks, and all this is in response to I can't pronounce the name. I think it's the Hod Hawarden fire, if I get that right, last year. So Riverside's really taking proactive steps to combat illegal firework activity. I think the first offense is $1,500 there in Riverside. But yeah, is it worth it? I don't know. What does freedom look like? But also there's also consequences for decisions such as the Hawarden fire. I think it was the Hawarden fire. Hawarden or Hawarden? Somebody correct me on that. All right, moving into national news. Trump withdraws U.S. from UNESCO, the UN Economic Security Council, citing anti-American and anti-Israeli bias in policy. So again, making big moves on the world stage, only 6 months, and we're seeing major shifts in our in our global ally structures. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We got the top U.S. commander in Europe, General Grankowicz, I think I'm saying that right, Grankowicz, urging NATO to prepare for simultaneous conflicts in Europe and the Pacific. The idea there is that if China acts, it's going to use Russia and probably under a alliance with North Korea and Iran to keep the West busy in the European theater. So, World War 2.0, 3, we could call it whatever we want, right? It's still politics by other means, isn't it? All right. Yeah, it says it could coordinate with Russia to act together, and Xi Jinping may call on Russia to keep NATO busy with the North Korea and Iran fueling Russia's war economy. I want to point that out, war economy, and distracting the West. So it's about distracting the West, but it's also, keeping petroleum supply lines. We talked about, I don't know if we did in the past, I've looked into Belt and Road initiatives funded through the Asian Infrastructure Investment Banks, and that's basically going to unite the Sino-Russian continent and into Europe all the way up through Norway. So you see all the structures along the edges of NATO and why they're so important to the West and the East. And it is all politics by other means. All right, moving on. U.S. develops what's called LUCAS, stands for Low Cost Uncrewed Combat Attack System, similar to Iran's Shahad 136 and the Russian Garan 2. This is one of those Delta Wing drones developed by SpectreWorks, and it's basically a reliable, cost-effective Group 3 unmanned aerial surveillance vehicle. Yeah, going to be tasked with recon, recon, attack, and communications. SpectreWorks says it's ready for production and it can easily integrate into the U.S. forces now. So you start to see the evolution of these systems, or basically copy and paste from other nations that are developing similar like systems. You see it, all of it. We brought it up last week with Hammerhead with the Canadian Royal Navy. U.S. is now taking the Shahad design and making it one of their own. I think these things are interesting. In other news, the U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division are also using that it's the nano drone. It's the the Teledyne FLIR Black Hornet 4, if I got the name right. But it's one of those little quadcopters, or not quadcopters, the regular little tiny helicopter. Looks like a little Firefly. That one's got the FLIR on. It's very sick if you've seen it in real life. It's got FLIR video, it's small, so they're talking about low noise signature. But they're starting to integrate more of this drone technology because this was developed, I think, a few years back. I think in 15, but a push to integrate drone technology, and they're looking for all these other companies that are designing these systems to field them and integrate them quickly into the U.S. Army's units. Okay, moving on. A report from the Modern War Institute warns that a war with China would not just be fought in Indo-Pacific, but also in the U.S. homeland through irregular warfare. It would be aimed at undermining, get this, political will, disrupting infrastructure, and dividing society. Anyway, the report goes on to sort of how that would be used to fuel dissent, division, and cause economic turmoil. Yeah, basically kind of prodding local or civil disobedience and political will. But it also basically kind of goes, the report goes on to state like the notion that America is protected by its vast geography. We got the Pacific and the Atlantic on each side, right? That was at one time perceived as why the nation was so secure, but that theology is outdated. In fact, you saw recently with the Ukraine strike into deep parts of Russia's interior that being covering vast swaths of geography is really, it's an outdated thinking, or it's an outdated strategy. So more to follow when we look more into some of this other stuff. The United States Army Special Operations Command. I don't know if you guys saw it. I think everyone kind of saw it by now, but issued the duty to warn. That's an intelligence community directive. Yeah, I'm reading it right here. 191. So it's Intelligence Community Directive 191 that gives the prompt awareness to, in this case, it was retired folks that had roles in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. And so the duty to warn comes when there's a sufficient credible threat known, whether this was either by foreign activity or not, but there was definitely a specific threat that warned credible, duty to warn, and so those folks are warned. So you're seeing interesting things here in the United States, elevating certain threat levels. I don't know what threat level we're at right now with respect to the Department of Homeland Security. I know it was elevated in response to the Iranian strikes, and the last bulletin we got was, I want to say June 26th. I could be wrong on that, but it was somewhere recently. Is the recent threat bulletin describing the current terrorist threat in America and domestic terror threat, which means here in the homeland now. I encourage you guys to check out these definitions because when it comes to a court of law, that's what matters. Okay, Pentagon confirms reports and the removal of 700 Marines from the Los Angeles area, those that were called in to support the anti-ICE raids back in June. Those 700 Marines are now being called back. So that's good news. The federal response to that is always worthy of your attention, whatever side of the aisle you're on. Federal authorities, I don't know if you guys saw this one. The federal authorities arrested a Chinese national, a dual citizen, right? With stealing highly sensitive U.S. Military technology information and basically giving that to the Chinese government. So in this case, it was a 59-year-old guy, and he was basically giving them all the trade secrets on our hypersonic missile technology and those things. Because I think that everyone feels like it's like nuclear technology, at this, but no, we're talking about all the hypersonic stuff that's going on right now with munitions. All that hypersonic, stuff is what he was trading off to get to China, and he was apprehended in San Jose, and I think San Jose is a sanctuary city, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first in California. So, it's illegal immigration as far as the issue goes is a separate topic, but when you see where activity like this can be seeded. It's interesting to take note of that because when you want to find something like that, you may find them in a city where it's a little more lenient on identity and requirements to establish nationality. When cities are, need you for some reason to establish nationality. Anyway, I digress. Okay, this is an interesting story, and we're going to pick on the Army. Go Navy. But the U.S. Army just recently did a exercise in Germany using components from Ukraine, 278th Armored Cavalry Regiment, and 7th Army Airborne, I want to say, or Army Training Command, excuse me. Probably butcher these commands, but I'm the Navy. It's different. Ours are ships. Um, anyway, so Joint Command where they dropped a grenade from a drone, and that's not like why they got attention. I think they got attention was because the tweet, which was deleted, was basically the question was, "Have you ever seen a grenade drop from a drone before?" And it was the Army's tweet, and of course it's since been deleted because people are pointing out the West's reaction to catch up to what we're seeing in the battlefields of Ukraine, and what our Indo-Pacific threats are using or are developing and preparing and making. So in this case, I think the Army is kind of showing its underwear in some regards to how far they've come, but also where they're at. And it's an interesting story nonetheless. But I urge you to check that out because let's see here. It was the Skydio X10D drone. Okay, moving right along, close to 30 minutes. That's going to be a great edit. International, we go over to the international stuff towards the end. In this case, China's Kestrel Defense has reportedly unveiled the next-gen powered exoskeleton suit designed to enhance endurance and mobility of soldiers operating drones and advanced battlefield systems. Launching and controlling small UAVs, excuse me, it is tailored for drone operators, artillery, and recon teams. The modular backpack houses a power source and a data link in its back. The helmet holds up a heads-up display and provides augmented reality for the user for real-time SA and drone feed integration. I I look at this stuff here because I've seen the West's interest in modernizing its military forces with equipment and exoskeleton like systems. Um, what raises my attention, or not, yeah, what raises my concern, or at least what draws my attention, is the focus on giving the soldier or airman or sailor or whoever more task. So we're task saturating more of, think of the junior person who is probably 18 to 19 year olds. Don't get me wrong, everyone can perform and at the same time can be trained. But we're task saturating a human mind with a lot of things to do. If it's monitoring this, it's monitoring that. This is where I think AI is going to really shine. Is we're going to alleviate some of the decision-making points that lead up to a critical decision, such as lethal force or whatnot. But I think when we start to give these systems or these people more of these systems to manage and monitor, it becomes an interesting human study. Just personal experience when trying to integrate ATAC into a small unit, that was eye-opening in terms of what its capability brings to a small unit, but also the task saturation and focus on the systems and equipment. Folks tended to rely more on it rather than use it as a supplemental aid. Not that the folks that were using the ATAC were task saturated. It just brought my attention as to the over focus on it. And since it's cell phone based, folks are more comfortable using a cell phone. So you tended to see eyes down more than eyes up. Folks running a small unit with live live munitions, that may be concerning. Not only that, but in the instance we were practicing or using this was at nighttime, so obviously a giant blue screen in your face tends to light up everyone like a Christmas tree. So just doing practical things like that to expose sort of the weaknesses and limitations of what you can do with this technology and equipment. So in summary, with that exercise, it became apparent to me that there is a not a unit level use for ATAC. I mean, there's probably a use case out there, and please correct me if you're using it out there with this with no flaws. Kudos to you. You're an amazing superhero that we should all aspire to be. But us other folks here that are just learning things. Go out there, train with this equipment, and see where you find its value. In my case, I saw that it had more of a regional use. Say your folks are miles away, where you needed to get some type of reporting out in a map-based geospatial, where you needed to get some information out in like a geospatial mapping software tool, like ATAC. It has value there, but not necessarily in a connected way, in an offline way, using traditional means. I think it has value for maintaining things like a common operational picture, so you can plot things and plot the battle space. Anyway, I thought that story about the Chinese trying to level up their soldiers was a great way to sort of understand where technology has its use and its limitations. Okay, Poland. This is some more geopolitical news, but it's interesting because you see how all these other nations are discovering oil fields and natural gas pockets everywhere now all of a sudden, right? So Poland has just discovered one of their largest in its history near the German border, of all places. 33 million tons of oil with about 27 billion cubic meters of natural gas. So, as we were talking about earlier with the Russian Chinese partnership in the war economy, things like this start to make a little bit more of an impact on decision making. So, it's economically valued, the strategic will of a nation, and you weigh those things. Many folks can go out there and read Clausewitz and how all this works, but you'll see this posturing around resources. In this case, you're seeing a lot of posturing. We just big discoveries in Brazil, big discoveries in the United States, probably the biggest ever, right? And Germany, Tibet. There's so many places right now that are just popping up with tons of oil all of a sudden, right? So green is gone. Oil's back, baby. Get your shares in now. Okay, moving on. Ukraine company Odin has introduced its anti-aircraft drone. So this one I thought was very interesting because this is part of that huge initiative we talked about where Ukraine is sort of opening up the battlefield for R&D and test and development for everybody. If you got a company and you make drones, go to Ukraine, see if it works good. And then you can always wear that badge of battlefield tested, right? All right, and then we all buy it for like $1,000 and never use it. But in any case, this company, Odin, introduced the anti-aircraft drone. This one's called Windhat, and it's designed to intercept the Shahad-like Garan 2 and maybe the Lucas-style drones now. This thing's not that fast. I don't know if you guys see those things when they're flying in the media. They'll show them. They're only about 136 miles an hour tops. I mean, that's fast, but for an aircraft, that's why you're starting to see a lot of the counter drone survey or counter drone technology develop as well, which we'll get to here next in this next one. Ukraine develops the new mobile electronic warfare system based on the robotic platform, the UGV. They named this one. I can never say the names from Ukraine, but this one sounds like it's Gravitas Ad Berserk, and is entering serial production now. This thing's neat looking. It's got a range of 12 miles and about a 12-hour battery. But this is a jammer. This is a pretty cool jammer. It's basically it blocks all the bands that the FPV drones are using. So that whole 220 to 1050 megahertz and mesh networks. Think about it. So jamming mesh networks 1050 and ADSB. So this thing jams a lot. So if you're someone like me who has SDRs for everything and you're able to get ADSB, something like this would be jamming to me. But it also blocks the video channels like 2.4 all the way to 5.8 gigahertz. And it's basically got an effective range on this. Get this, on the omnidirectional antenna, like basically 800 yards or more, like a big circle, a 800-yard circle of blockage. That's some protection there. That's some advanced warning. And the directional antenna can get a little further than that, up to about 1,000 yards. So all that is, if you're operating in an area and you're denying the communication space to your adversary, a jammer with this type of range, you can effectively mission plan around what you can safely be covered by with, I guess, up to about 1,000 yards or 800 if you're using the omnidirectional. So, when you're doing your mission planning and things like that with drones in mind, keep in mind you can structure your training around real life assets and equipment that's out there, and you can practice to some of those types of standards and see what it looks like. Put all that together, and that's some of the things we're going to be doing in the future here is trying to organize groups out to do practicals where we can do some drone and radio use work and practice our radio skills and get active and get out there and kind of work with others with radio in a real niche way. I think people will get appreciation from. Anyway, moving on. Staying with Ukraine though. Oh, this story is about fiber optics versus the glass cabling. So, okay, excuse me. So the next story basically is the resources reported about drone tests organized by the Brave One platform, which is engaged in developing military technologies for the armed forces of Ukraine. So in this case, they're trying to show the report that the glass fiber optic cable that we're starting to see on the drones and the plastic polymer line. So they're showing that the lightweight polymer fiber optic line compared to the glass fiber optic line is lighter, capable, very similar to the fiber optic in the glass or the glass fiber optic. But anyway, the reports are showing like the huge ecological disaster that's causing with all the wire that's across the entire countryside with respect to the drones. They don't go very far, but this long stretch of wire is literally attached to the drone, and it's going way out and spanning this wire all over trees, brush, vegetation. Animals are starting to make bird nests with it. So it's a huge ecological concern for the folks there that are developing these technologies, or the folks that are being victimized by the folks there developing these technologies. How about that? All right, last story coming up here. Taiwan is getting in the drone game. They're requesting 48,000 drones, and they're classifying their drone requests in like different types. So they want them all. They want like the high-speed ones. They want the grenade dropping ones. They want the ones that go for surveillance, logistics. Taiwan is getting in the game with drones. Is in line with much of the rest of the world in developing their unmanned or uncrewed vessels and equipment for future battlefields. All right, guys, that's going to take us here to my last section over here today, which is what I want you guys to check out, which is a website. This website is dflock.me. All right, go bookmark it, okay? Put it in your phone or in your home screen somewhere, but bookmark dflock.me, your go-to resource for understanding and addressing the growing presence of automatic license plate reader systems in our communities. All right, so we talked about flock cameras, what they're capable of doing, where they are. This website has the map where they're shown. So you can go up there and see if there's a flock camera in your area or where you're operating or where you're going. You can go see if there's a flock camera there. Pretty neat website. So just building general awareness. Okay, coming up, we got some events for you to check out. We got the Mayoral Summit on August 6th at Elijah's Restaurant in Claremont. That's on Claremont Mesa Boulevard. You're going to open the doors at 6, but check this out. You're going to get all the mayors there. You're going to get Bill Wells, El Cajon, John Franklin in Vista, Dane White of Escondido, and Keith Blackburn of Carlsbad. So check that out, Mayoral Summit. When do you ever get a chance to chat and sit down with the mayors? This is $10 dinner. I think it's a dinner. I'm not sure, but it's at the restaurant. But $10 gets you in there, get the schmooze and booze with the elected officials of your communities around you. Let them know what concerns you. Why are the fees for CCWs going up? Shouldn't it be going away? Or other things, that may be looming in the future. What's the city council's take on this issue? There's several legal cases involving these districts and these cities. So go out there and go schmooze and get some inside baseball on how that's playing out. $10 gets you in the Mayoral Summer Summit at Elijah's Restaurant there in Claremont, off Claremont Mesa Boulevard. Check it out. All right, that's also going to take us to this Saturday. Go out there, get your tickets now. We still have seats open for Intro to Off-Grid Communications. That's going to be at Cargo in El Cajon. Check out Cargo. They got lock boxes there for all your needs. So I don't know if you guys knew this recently on Gun Owners Radio. Check it out. Woo! Wrecking the shirt for the guns. Gun Owners Radio just put out some good advice. You saw my stories the other day. Alicia's out there giving you some good juicy gossip there you're going to need so you can get around safely and legally around California. And believe it or not, it's not as bad as you think. But Cargo can get you set up there. They got the boxes. They got the things you need. So check them out. And come join us Saturday. We got seats open. It's not just your general ham radio class. This is better. This is something else. Okay, this is something that I think prepares a lot of people for not only disaster, but you are going to be a community asset for your neighborhood. You can make yourself like the warlord or something with controlling all the info, because you don't have to rely on Elon. You don't have to rely on AT&T, Verizon, or any of the large providers across the nation. You rely on yourself. As long as you got like some battery power, you can pretty much get by. So, but also there's communication dates way back before all this stuff. So come by, check us out. We got some great topics. All right, guys, that's gonna take me out here. We are done. We are giving you Friday fun, things I found interesting. Let me know what's going on in your world. Let me know how I'm doing. Give me your questions in the comments below. But this is Rooster signing off. Have fun this weekend, guys.